Good morning, everybody. We'll be starting off in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. It's another beautiful day the Lord's gave us. As always, it's an honor and privilege to be in His house and be in His presence, together with fellow believers, brothers and sisters, and study His Word and be in His presence in His house. It's always a privilege to do so. And again, we'll be in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Paul's going on. He's been talking to the Corinthians about some things that he'd heard is kind of going wrong in the church and things that he's trying to correct. And, him being like a spiritual father to the church, he's trying to give that spiritual wisdom to them. And, as we was closing out chapter 6 last week, he kind of started talking about marriage and about how, when two people are joined together, they're made one, which goes back to Genesis when God put Adam and Eve together. So he's continuing on here with marriage, starting off in chapter 7. Now concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. And he's starting off to say here, that he's unattached, he's not married, and he says that that's good if a man can stay not married so that he can fully focus on God and doing the spiritual things in life. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. So he's saying, if you can, control your flesh and your desires, the fleshly, physical desires you have, then it's best not to be married. But he's saying that, if that's something you don't think you can do, then it's good to have a wife or have a husband to get together there to do things the right, proper way. Because, of course, marriage is a gift that God gave people. He gave that and blessed it. And, physical relationship in a marriage is a blessing, and it is a pure thing in marriage between a man and a woman. But, he's saying, don't fornicate. If you can't handle that, the physical desires that you naturally have in the body, if you can't control those things, then find a spouse and be married so that it can be pure. Going on, verse 3. Let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the husband. So he's saying there, that there has to be a balance in a marriage and a relationship. There has to be, where the other person is looking for the best interest of the other person in that relationship. It's not always going to be about you, but it's about the other person. You have to work at that. It has to be a balance. There's give and take. And it's not always, can't be one-sided. We have to take care of each other and do what's best for the other person and take care of them. Verse 4. The wife hath not power of her own body, but the husband. And likewise also the husband hath not power of his own body, but the wife. And that's going back to, again, how in Genesis when God put Adam and Eve together and said that there would be two flesh to become one. So, once you're married and you come together, you're one. So you can't treat the other person like they're different. They're actually you. They're part of each other. You come together, there's that old saying, which one's the better half in a relationship, whatever it is, but you can't look at it that way. You both have to do your best and come together, but you are two halves that have been put together and made a whole as one. So you need to treat that person like you would treat yourself and love them the way you would want to be loved yourself and take care of that person and not be mean to them, not try to tower over them or power over them, manipulate them, whatever that may be, things that this world tries to tell you have to do. But the spiritual idea there is that there's a balance and that you do what's best for them and they do what's best for you. You take care of each other, and then there's a happy balance there. Defraud ye not one the other, except it be with consent for a time, that ye may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your incontinency. So he's moving on into that in that physical part of the relationship, and he's saying don't punish each other, don't try to control or manipulate each other, withholding that physical contact. That can move on also to, the mental, emotional relationship there. Don't mistreat the other person, be good to them, take care of the needs they have before you, hoping that they would do the same for you, because when you start fighting and you start trying to manipulate and do all those kind of things like that, you're opening the door for Satan to come in and to have a crack there in that relationship. and that he can come in there and split you all up, tempt the other person. And that's not something that you want to do, because it's, the relationship between a man and a woman, that husband and wife, the only other person that has to be in that relationship is God, because it does take three. It's not just the man and the woman, but God has to be in the center of that relationship. And when he's there, everything's good and it's balanced and it stays good. You have to make sure you work to keep Satan out of that relationship. Don't give him any opportunities, just like your spiritual individual walk. Any cracks that you give Satan to get in, he's going to take, and he's going to try to work on you. It's the same way with your marriage. Any room you give him to get in there, he's going to wedge in. He's going to try to split and break up and destroy that marriage, because he knows that, that's part of God's perfect plan. And that for the home, that there's a man and a woman, they're married, they have their children, they bring their children up together, there's a family, and then those families make strong churches, and those strong churches make strong communities, make strong countries, makes the world like it's supposed to be. So God knows that plan, and he has that plan in this book, and that's the way we're supposed to do these things. And Satan knows that, and so he tries to destroy it at the basic unit. So you can't give any room for him to get in there. Verse 6, "But I speak this by permission, and not of commandment. For I would that all men were even as myself, but every man hath his proper gift of God, one after this manner, and another after that." So he's saying, that everybody has a work to do. They have gifts, they have talents, they have abilities to do. And he's saying that, when you get married, then your focus sometimes has to be on that spouse, because, the word says that when you're married, you have a spouse, that you have a commitment to make to them. You have to take care of them. There's things you got to do. You have to spend time with them. And Paul's saying any time you spend with them is taken away from your spiritual walk, your spiritual journey, and the things you're supposed to do for God. So he's saying it's best if you can stay unmarried. But he also understands that that's not going to be the idea for most people. So he says, "I say therefore to the unmarried and widows, it is good for them if they abide even as I. But if they cannot contain, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn." So again, he's saying, if you can't control your physical desires, then the needs of the physical body, then you should go ahead and get married, but it's best not to. That's what he's saying. Now, me thinking in this understanding is that, if you're praying for a spouse, which you should be, and you should never marry anybody unless you have prayed about it, God's revealed that is his will for you, but he's going to put two people together, they're going to work together. Because I think that's his pure intent there, and his idea is that when he puts two people together, that, their gifts, their abilities, their talents are going to balance with each other. They're going to complement each other, and they're going to work in a ministry together somewhere. And I think that's the perfect plan. Going on, verse 10, "And unto the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord, let not the wife depart from her husband. But if she depart, let her remain unmarried, or be reconciled to her husband, and let not the husband put away his wife." So he's saying when you go into this, you make that commitment, because when you're married, you're making that commitment to God also, that you're going to join with this person. So it's not good to separate. It's not good to depart or to put away somebody that you've been married to. But you need to work and do all you can to stay together. "But to the rest speak I not the Lord. If any brother hath a wife that believeth not, and she be pleased to dwell with him, let him not put her away. And the woman which hath an husband that believeth not, and if he be pleased to dwell with her, let her not leave him." So he's talking about the unbalanced yoke there, that there's a believer and a non-believer that's together. But if they can live together in peace and be okay with that, then it said then don't put them away just because they don't believe. Going on, "For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else were your children unclean, but now are they holy." So he's saying there, that there's hope for children in a split home, because the believing parent can, teach the children the truth and show them the way. And then moving on, But if the unbelieving depart, let him depart. A brother or a sister is not under bondage in such cases, but God hath called us to peace. For what knowest thou, O wife, whether thou shalt save thy husband? Or how knowest thou, O man, whether thou shalt save thy wife? So he's saying here, if you have an unbelieving spouse, the way you live, if you're living that good, holy life, that pure life, you're following God, you're being obedient, you're going to be a light to them. And there's hope that you can spread that and share that they would seek God and they could be saved also. If you're loving them, you're being nice to them, you're not mistreating them because they're not a believer. You can't be mean to them. Just like anybody else, you're not going to win anybody by being mean and cruel to them. You got to show them the love of Christ. So that starts at home also. If you're in a relationship with an unbeliever, you've got to show that love of Christ to them and be Christ for them, that hopefully they'll be saved. Turn to Christ and be saved. Verse 17, but as God hath distributed to every man, as the Lord hath called every one, so let him walk, and so ordain I in all churches. Is any man called being circumcised? Let him not become uncircumcised. Is any called in uncircumcision? Let him not be circumcised. And he's saying here, however you've come to Christ, stay that way. Let him change you. Don't go try to be in somebody else. Don't try to do things a different way. Be things the way that you're called and the way the Spirit leads you to be. Circumcision is nothing and uncircumcision is nothing, but the keeping of the commandments of God. So we need to pray. We need to seek him in this word. We need to understand and ask him to reveal to us what we need to know, what we need to see, and how we need to be, and let the Spirit lead us, and not man, not traditions, not what grandma and grandpa said, unless it is of the word. Anything, you got to check everything, check the spirit of everything that you've been taught, and make sure that it lines up with the word. And that the Spirit that dwells within you doesn't have any problems with that. The Spirit will let you know, hey, yeah, that's good, let's go that way. No, that's not really that right, let's not go that way. You got to check that and let the Lord lead you. Let the Spirit move in you. Let every man abide in the same calling wherein he was called. Art thou called, being a servant? Care not for it, but if thou mayest be made free, use it rather. Then also, everybody has a special gift, a talent, an ability they've been given. We're born with that. God created each and every one of us for a specific purpose. We need to figure out what those things are. And then when we figure out what those are, when the Spirit reveals that to us, God shows us, and we know what these things are, then we need to use those talents and abilities to glorify him, to bring honor and glory to him, to spread his word, and use them, because that's an honorable thing to do and a spiritual way to walk. We don't need to try to get into something we're not supposed to do. Maybe we have multiple abilities, but, the Spirit will lead you where you need to be. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. Make sure that you're called to do that and to work in that area. For he that is called in the Lord, being a servant, is the Lord's free man. Likewise also he that is called, being free, is Christ's servant. So whatever work he's going to call you in to do, it's not going to really feel like work. It should feel like that's a peace. There should be a hope there. You should feel free in that work that you're doing. That doesn't mean it's not going to be work and it's going to be easy all the time, but it should be rewarding to you and it should be satisfying to you to do that. And if you're doing something and it's not, it feels awkward, it feels like it's, maybe a shoe that's too tight or something like that, whatever it is, it feels awkward or weird, you then should pray about it and make sure you're where you're supposed to be. Because there should be joy and peace in doing what God's called you to do. Ye are bought with a price, be not ye the servants of men. That's a loaded verse right there, because you think about that, we're bought with a price. Well, what price was we bought with? Of course, that's, Jesus Christ. God gave his only begotten Son for us. He came and he laid down his life. They beat him unmercifully and almost to where he couldn't be recognized. And they put him on that cross. He shed that blood. And that's the price that God paid for us. That's the price that Jesus Christ paid with his very flesh and blood for us. So we have to honor that and understand that we're His. We're Christ now. When we accept Him, we're covered in that blood that He shed, and we're made new in the Spirit and regenerated, and we're, serving Him, that we're not our own anymore. We're His. So we can't be servants of men. We can't serve this world anymore. We got to turn away from the fleshly lusts. We got to turn away from the call of this world, and we have to listen to that call of the Father and God. We have to serve Him with the best ability that we have. Most people you talk to that'll be honest with you, when they were lost and they were sinners in the world, they partied, they did whatever it was they were doing in sin. They did it with everything that they had. We should bring that same passion to God, because it's so much more. It's so much better. It's pure, it's holy, it's spiritual, and, there's no drawbacks to serving God. There's no downside to serving God. This world, that sin, it comes to fruition, it brings death. So, we were to take that passion we had when we were lost and doing the things of the world, and we need to turn that into working for God and doing the things He calls us to do, and be a good servant for Him. Put everything we have into serving Him. Serving Him, doing the things we need to do, reading, praying, keeping that relationship strong with Him, and doing the work He calls us to do, and without hesitation. When we were lost and sinners, we never hesitated to go and do the things that the flesh called us to do. We should be the same way spiritually. When the Spirit draws us to do something, even if we don't understand it, even if it's a little confusing, even if it's out of our comfort zone, we should be able to just say, well, this is what God wants me to do. He's got the plan. He's got everything ready. I just got to obey and step out into that and be bold in that, knowing that it's His will and His work, and that we will be blessed for doing that work that we have, that He's called us to do, when we do it cheerfully, in obedience. Brethren, let every man wherein he is called therein abide with God. So whatever He's called you to do, get in that lane, stay there, stay in the center of His will. Well, how do you know you're there? Well, you're praying, you're reading the Word. He's going to reveal things to you. The Spirit will let you know. If you go somewhere or somebody asks you or starts bringing up something like, hey, do you want to go do this? And it's something you shouldn't be doing, the Spirit will check you. It'll let you know, nah, let's not do that. And of course, there's obvious things also. If it contradicts the Word of God, then, well, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do those things. But we have to stay in that center of His will, the closest as we can. I don't want to be walking on the edge, where I can be tempted and drawn off. I want to be right in the center. That way if I do stumble, there's plenty of room for me to fall right there, still in the center where I'm supposed to be. I don't want to play any games. I don't want to roll the dice and take a chance with my soul. I want to be right close to Him as I can be, right in the dead center of His will, in the middle of that road, not on the curb where I can fall off and fall out into a ditch or whatever. I want to stay as close as I can, and that should be something that draws us to Him in that. Verse 25, now concerning virgins I have no commandment of the Lord, yet I give my judgment as one that hath obtained mercy of the Lord to be faithful. I suppose therefore that this is good for the present distress. I say that it is good for a man to be so. Art thou bound unto a wife? Seek not to be loosed. Art thou loosed from a wife? Seek not a wife. Now Paul's saying, I'm talking to you guys about how he felt about, being single, staying that way, that he felt like that's what his calling was, and that if he'd had a wife or children, family, whatever, that would have hindered the work that he'd done. Well, he was a missionary, moved around a lot, and then some people do that, and they're married, have large families, and work in missions and move and do all that, and I think that's a good thing. But Paul said that he felt like he needed to be single. So he's saying, but he's telling these people, now if you're married, stay married. I'm not telling you to break up and divorce or whatever that is. And he's saying, but if you are bound, stay with them. Don't try to be loosed. And he goes, but if you are loosed, don't seek a wife. Try to be more like me. He's going on. And if thou marry, thou hast not sinned. And if a virgin marry, she hath not sinned. Nevertheless, such shall have trouble in the flesh, but I spare you. And he's going into that saying, that, it's not a bad thing if you do marry. It's not against God's will. It's not a sin. If you go into that in the right way and it's done properly with God. He's saying, but he knows that there's going to be trouble. Well, two people living together under one roof. They're not always going to agree on things, and that opens the door for the Satan to get in and start fights and things like that. But if you're praying, you're seeking, you're loving the person that you can, you'll work through that. God will take care of you, He'll deliver you. But He's just saying, there's troubles that come with that. And of course, then you're obligated to take care of your spouse. You have to spend time with them. You have to build that relationship. And every minute you're spending with them is something, He's saying here that could be taken away from the work you're doing with God. Of course, if you're working together, and you're praying together, you're studying the Bible together, you're teaching your children that, you're spending time in church together. That God can work through that too. So, but Paul's just saying that this is what he felt that he should do, and he feels that's best. But, there's other alternatives there as long as you're seeking God and listening to His will. But this I say, brethren, the time is short, it remaineth, that both they that have wives be as though they had none, and they that weep as though they wept not, and they that rejoice as though they rejoiced not, and they that buy as though they possessed not. And he's going on into this saying that time is short. He knows that clock was ticking. He didn't know that we would have 2,000 years after Christ came and died that we have here. He didn't think that we'd have that much time. We still don't know how much time we have, but it is short. The season is upon us. We need to be at work. We need to be focused, and we need to be doing what God's called us to do and working those gifts and talents and abilities, and we need to be reaching the lost. And He's saying, we need to make sure we're focused on that, not neglect the things that we have to do, and, our marriage, our children, what we got to do in life, but we need to make sure that we're putting in as much effort with God as we are anything else, and keep Him first. We can't shortchange Him, especially as the time winds down. That clock's ticking and the devil's working overtime. We need to be working overtime too, letting that light shine out in the darkness. Verse 31, and they that use this world as not abusing it, for the fashion of this world passeth away. So again, all these worldly things are eventually going to pass away. The things that we do that are fleshly, the things that we do in the world, these aren't going to matter. They're not going to add up at the end. The spiritual things are what matter. So we have to be focused and still be about His will, and reaching out to those and trying to call out those people out of the darkness and call them to Christ so He could save them. But I would have you without carefulness. He that is unmarried careth for the things that belong to the Lord, how he may please the Lord. So he's saying, the single people, they're more focused. They have more time. They have more attention to pour into that calling and gifts and abilities they're doing. But he that is married careth for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife. So they're saying, you have to give up some of that time to build that relationship, to take care of the duties you have and to your spouse. So again, that's Paul's case that he's trying to make about being single. There is difference also between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman careth for the things of the Lord, and she may be holy both in body and in spirit. But she that is married careth for the things of the world, how she may please her husband. And this I speak for your own profit, not that I may cast a snare upon you, but for that which is comely, and that ye may attend upon the Lord without distraction. So again, he's saying, any relationship that you're in is going to take up some more of your time. It's going to take away from the focus that you have. But of course, ultimately, the partner that you choose, your spouse, if you're praying and seeking the right one, God's going to send somebody, I feel like, that's going to help you in your ministry and your work, and you're going to complement each other to move forward together and do that work together. But if any man think that he behaveth himself uncomely toward his virgin, if she pass the flower of her age, and need so require, let him do what he will, he sinneth not, let them marry. Nevertheless, he that standeth steadfast in his heart, having no necessity, but hath power over his own will, and hath so decreed in his heart that he will keep his virgin, doeth well. So then he that giveth her in marriage doeth well, but he that giveth her not in marriage doeth better. So he's saying it's a good thing to get married, to have that balance and things, but maybe the better way is to stay single. This is Paul here talking about that. The wife is bound by the law as long as her husband liveth. But if her husband be dead, she is at liberty to be married to whom she will, only in the Lord. And he's saying if you're widowed, you should stay widowed to focus on the relationship with God. But she is happier if she so abide after my judgment, and I think also that I have the Spirit of God. So as long as you're keeping God first, you're going to be fine, and let Him lead you, let Him guide you, let this word guide you, your prayer, and the Spirit will tell you things you need to know. So just let's go with that. Let God lead you where you need to be and all those things. 1 Corinthians chapter 8. Now as touching things offered unto idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffeth up, but charity edifieth. If any man think that he knoweth anything, he knoweth nothing, yet as he ought to know. But if any man love God, the same is known of him. So Paul's addressing the issue here that I guess they've brought up, that there were some people that were, fellowshipping with other people, I guess, like the heathen or non-believers, people that worshiped idols, and I guess they were eating and dining with them, and they were saying that it was wrong for them to go and fellowship with those people and eat, knowing that they'd slaughtered those animals and cooked them, and they'd offered them to idols and not God, and they were eating these things. But if any man love God, the same is known of him. As concerning therefore the eating of those things that are offered in sacrifice unto idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and that there is none other God but one. So he's saying we know that they're doing this in vain because they're worshiping these fake gods they made up. They're not real, and so they're not really doing anything when they're the heathen people are not really actually doing anything by offering these animals to these fake gods, because they're nothing, and that's not anything they're doing. And there's only one God, and that's the God that they serve, the God of this Father of Jesus Christ. For though there be that are called gods, whether in heaven or in earth, as there be gods many and lords many, but to us there is but one God, the Father, of whom are all things, and we in him, the one Lord Jesus Christ, by whom are all things, and we by him. So he's saying, they don't know. They think that the man has made up all these other gods and idols and lords and things that they serve and worship and all that. He goes, but we know there's only one God, and that, he's called us and he saved us through his Son, Jesus Christ. He is the Father of the Jesus Christ, and we are all things in Christ. And, because he's gave us all things, and, we by him, we're all, it's all through Jesus Christ. Everything else is not. So he's saying the things that these people are doing, they're just going through motions, and they're not really doing anything worshiping these fake idols. They're just rebelling against God. Howbeit there is not in every man that knowledge, for some with conscience of the idol unto this hour eat it as a thing offered unto an idol, and their conscience being weak is defiled. So he's saying they don't understand, what they're doing. It's like they're weak in mind and spirit, and they don't know, and they're destroying themselves because of their ignorance, and they're defiled because they're doing these things. But meat commendeth us not to God, for neither, if we eat, are we the better, neither, if we eat not, are we the worse. So, these physical things, he's saying, what we eat and don't eat, that's not really what matters. It's that relationship with God. We're not really better off or worse off, whatever it is that we're consuming. Verse 9, but take heed lest by any means this liberty of yours becoming a stumbling block to them that are weak. For if any man see thee which has knowledge sit at meat in the idol's temple, shall not the conscience of him which is weak be emboldened to eat those things which are offered to idols? So he's saying if we know these things are offered to idols, we're going to give that impression then that if, that the believer in Christ is dining and serving, they go to the temple and they eat with these people that are worshiping these idols and offering that sacrifice to them, then the people are going to see that that's what they believe, and they're worshiping that idol too. So that's going to tarnish your relationship with Christ and your image out in the public and of who you're supposed to be serving. So he's saying, don't do that. You're going to confuse the people that don't understand. And, it's like, that eating that meat's not that bad of a thing because, it's not offered anything that's true, but it's going to give the impression that you believe that, and it's going to distract from Christ. It's going to be a blemish on Christ. He says, so don't do these things. You're going to confuse people. And then those people are going to be confused, and then they're going to be condemned because they've seen what you've done. So, don't let your good be spoken evil of, basically is what that boils back down to. So you should avoid these things and don't do that. And through thy knowledge shall the weak brother perish for whom Christ died. So he's saying you're going to mislead people by doing that. So separate from those people. Don't dine with them. Don't eat with them. Don't eat things that you know that they've sacrificed to idols, because it's just not a good thing to do. It gives the wrong impression. It's going to make people think that you're believing in that too, and it's going to lead people away. We need to be pointing to Christ. There's more important things out there to be doing, teaching, preaching Christ. But when ye sin so against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, ye sin against Christ, because you're turning them away. You're becoming a stumbling block, and you're tripping up people that need to be brought to Christ. Wherefore, if meat make my brother to offend, I will eat no flesh while the world standeth, lest I make my brother to offend. So again, he's basically just saying here that anything we do that may be spread darkness, spread sin, it may confuse somebody else or turn them away from Christ. We need to avoid that. We need to stop doing that, because that's a sin to us. To mislead somebody, to turn them away from the truth, or to get them to where they stray off, that's a sin for us, and we can't do those things. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Am I not an apostle? Am I not free? Have I not seen Jesus Christ our Lord? Are not ye my work in the Lord? So he's talking to them, and he's saying, I've started this church here. It's like that's what I was sent to do. That's what God called me to do. Christ, called me out to go do this, to teach about Him, to set this church up. And most of you all, came to know the knowledge of Christ through the teaching and preaching that I done. If I be not an apostle unto others, yet doubtless I am to you, for the seal of mine apostleship are ye in the Lord. Again, he's saying, I started this church here. I told you all the truth. You all are ones that started under me. Mine answer to them that do examine me in this: have we not power to eat and to drink? Have we not power to lead about a sister, a wife, as well as other apostles, and as the brethren of the Lord, and Cephas, or I only, and Barnabas? Have not we power to forbear working? And he's saying we have this authority through God. We've been called out. We're saved. We've been called to teach, to preach. It's like we have this authority to do these things and to walk in this power to teach you all, to lead you all, and to be examples. Who goeth a warfare any time at his own charges? Who planteth a vineyard and eateth not of the fruit thereof? Or who feedeth a flock and eateth not of the milk of the flock? So he's saying here, if we're going to teach this, if we're going to preach this, if we're going to live this, then we need to be living this way. We have to back this up. We have to live the gospel. If we're going to teach it, if we're going to preach it, and we're going to tell others about it, then we have to talk the talk. We got to walk the walk. We got to back that up. Say I these things as a man, or saith not the law the same also? When he's saying this is not just me talking, that's what this word says. If you're going to proclaim Christ, then you need to be living like Christ. If you're going to claim that God is your God, then you need to act like He's your God, and be a son or a daughter to Him, and be obedient and walk under His will and what His word says to do. For it is written in the law of Moses, Thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn. Doth God take care for oxen? Or saith He it altogether for our sakes? For our sakes, no doubt, this is written, that he that ploweth should plow in hope, and he that thresheth in hope should be partaker of his hope. If you go out and you plow out a garden and you put the seeds in the ground, you cover them up, you fertilize them, you water them, you're doing that because you want to grow a garden. You're going to want corn, you're going to want potatoes, you're going to want tomatoes, whatever it is you're growing. You're having hope that when that work that you do is going to bring forth that fruit. And then you're going to want to get that fruit in the summer and the fall. When you harvest that in, you're going to want to eat that fruit. So he's saying here, if you're living this life, you have to hope and believe that it's not in vain, that there is hope in Christ, that He is the way, and that at the end of this journey, that you're gonna get into heaven because of your obedience and your sacrifice that you made, and that blood that you've been washed in, and all that you've done for Him. You're gonna get to heaven. You need to live that way and believe and have hope. You can't be sad. You can't be dragging around and thinking, hey, maybe I'm going to make it, maybe not. That's not you got to know so. You got to live in that and walk in that strength and understand that blood washed you clean, the Spirit regenerated you, that you've been obedient, you're serving Him, and He's going to accept you. You have to walk in that strength and understand, that Christ saved you. It is by the blood, but that there's hope that you're going to make it to heaven. If we have sown unto you spiritually things, it is a great thing if we shall reap your carnal things. And so he's saying here, we got to walk in spirit and expect in spirit. We can't go and tell you, to live this way, but live carnally. We can't flip that. We got to, back up what we say. We have to live the way that we teach, that we preach, the way that we tell you to do things. We have to do the same things. If others be partakers of this power over you, are not we rather? Nevertheless, we have not used this power, but suffer all things, lest we should hinder the gospel of Christ. Do ye not know that they which minister about holy things live of the things of the temple, and they which wait at the altar are partakers with the altar? That means you got to, again, what you're teaching, what you're saying, how you live, all has to line up in the same direction. You can't, be in the church house Sunday morning, all holier and good, and then you're out at the bars through the weekend, through the rest of the week and living any way that you want to be. You've got to back up what you're doing. You got to live what you're saying. You got to live that truth. Even so hath the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. But I have used none of these things, neither have I written these things, that it should be so done unto me, for it were better for me to die than that any man should make my glorying void. So again, you have to have the truth there. You don't want to stumble and fall. You don't want to live a double life. You don't want to have any opportunity for anybody to come down and tear down what you've done and besmirch the church or put a black mark on Christ because of the way you lived and how you've done that. You've got to live what you're saying and back that up. For though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of, for necessity is laid upon me. Yea, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel. And he said, I know what I've been called to do, and I need to go and do that. And because there's a calling for that, there's a need. There should be a fire burning in me to know that this is what I have to do, and I have to get this done. And it should be something that I'm wanting to do of my own will, because God's called me to do that. I want to be obedient to Him. And it's a sin to me to go against what He's called me to do if I don't be obedient to Him. It says, woe unto me if I preach not the gospel. He's got to complete that work. That's what He was called to do. For if I do this willingly, I have a reward. But if against my will, a dispensation of the gospel is committed unto me. And he should want to do that willingly. It shouldn't be a chore. It shouldn't be a burden. It's not always going to be easy, but there's peace and joy in coming and knowing that you're doing what God called you to do. He's going to give you strength. He's going to give you hope and peace. What is my reward then? Verily, that when I preach the gospel, I may make the gospel of Christ without charge, that I abuse not my powers in the gospel. And so he's saying, I'm not going to do anything to misrepresent God. I'm not going to take advantage of other people with this gospel. I'm just going to put this truth out there. I'm going to do the things I know to do. And I'm not going to abuse any authority or power that I have. For though I be free from all men, yet have I made myself servant unto all, that I might gain the more. And again, it's just like Christ. Christ had all the power in the universe, but He humbled Himself down and made Himself a servant. He didn't walk around saying that I'm the boss, you got to do what I say. He just always told the truth, and He served, He loved. We have to walk in that too. We can't puff ourselves up and be prideful and say, well, I'm doing better than you, so I'm in charge. That's not the way it works. You got to have love, you got to have peace, and you got to tell that truth. And you got to be a servant, because that's the example Christ gave us. And unto the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. To them that are without law, as without law, being not without law to God, but under the law to Christ, that I might gain them that are without law. So you got to go to people where they're at. You got to get down there, talk where they're at, see where they're at, and understand where they're coming from. You got to have a love and a peace. You got to, get in there with these people, and you can't think that they're, make them think you're above them or whatever it is. You got to associate with them, build a relationship, and understand where they're coming from, and talk to them in a way they can understand, to spread this Christ, to spread the gospel, to spread the truth, to win these people. To the weak became I as weak, that I might gain the weak. I have made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. And again, that's just following the example Christ made. That's what he said. That's what he done. He humbled himself. He came down here, and he loved and he helped and he sought and he taught, and he was about the Father's business. That's the way we have to be also. And this I do for the gospel's sake, that I might be partaker thereof with you. Know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth prize? So run that ye may obtain. Here on earth, when they have contests, they have races, there's one winner. There's one team always wins every time you do that. But in this walk with God, if you're obedient and you do the things he calls you to do and you walk with him, we can all win. But you have to keep trying. You have to keep running. You have to keep doing your best. You can't let down. You have to understand that you have to keep running and keep working. You have to keep being obedient and building that relationship and not give up. You can't stop. You can't quit on it. You have to finish the race if you want the prize, which of course ultimately is heaven. And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. No, they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. So, again, we have to strive to be more like Christ. We have to strive to know more of this word, to know God in a deeper level, to have more of the Spirit, to walk in that. Because what we're working towards here, like all these things on earth, all the work that we do, the worldly things, the money we collect, the power, the authority, the races we win, the trophies we win, that's all corruptible. It's all going to go away. But that crown of life is a spiritual thing. It's incorruptible. It's perfect. It's holy. It's pure. When we win that, through Christ and that sacrifice he made in his blood, we go through that blood and we walk in obedience in the Spirit, we're going to have that incorruptible crown that's going to, carry us over, and it's going to be our reward in heaven. I therefore so run, not as uncertainly, so fight I, not as one that beateth the air. And so we know that what we're doing is not in vain. There's a purpose for what we're doing. And we're not just doing this to be beating our chest, to be drawing attention to ourselves. It's not pride, that there's a work that we're doing. And we know that it's going to produce fruit, because we're doing the spiritual things, the holy things, the God's word. We're being obedient to him. And we're not just, wasting time. We're not wasting our breath. We're not wasting the work that we're doing. There's going to be a reward for that. But I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I had preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. And so he's saying, you got to keep your own flesh down. You got to crucify that flesh. Like Christ said, pick up your cross daily and follow me. That's what he's saying here again. We have to put down this flesh and let the Spirit grow. We have to let the Spirit lead us and guide us and direct us and study this word and seek him and do the best that we can, because we don't want to fail. Because if we fall back into our bodies and our world and our earthly, fleshly lusts and things, it's going to entice us away and we're going to be lost. But if we stay in the Spirit, we're obedient, we serve him the best of our ability, and we're doing it out of love. We're doing it out of respect for him. We're doing that, out of purity of our heart because we want to be with him. We're going to get that reward. And we're going to make it someday. And we have to help each other along that way. So we'll close there this morning. But again, it's a close way, it's a holy way, and we have to build that relationship. It's not about us, it's all about him. It's about Christ, and he's that bridge that it's gonna carry us over to God in heaven.